You know that feeling when you're doing something completely ordinary, washing dishes maybe, or waiting for the kettle to boil, and suddenly you're somewhere else entirely. Maybe it's that summer when everything changed, or that decision you made that set your whole life on a different path. Those moments just arrive, don't they? Uninvited but persistent. Most of us brush these memories aside. We tell ourselves we're just getting old, dwelling on the past. But what if I told you these memories aren't just nostalgia? What if they're actually something far more valuable, something most of us never realize we're sitting on? There's something remarkable happening in our minds when we reflect on our personal stories. And what you're about to hear might change how you think about your own life and why it deserves attention, even now, especially now. Here's something we rarely talk about. When you've lived 7, 8 decades, it's easy to shrink your own story down to nothing. We compare ourselves to people who did big things, the ones who started companies or traveled the world or wrote books, and we think, well, my life was just ordinary. But think about this for a moment. When we believe we have nothing worth sharing, something interesting happens to our thoughts. They turn inward. They become smaller. We start moving through our days as if we're just taking up space, waiting. Now flip that around. When you believe you have something worth saying, even if it's just to yourself, even if it's just in a journal nobody else will read, your whole posture changes, literally and figuratively. You're not shrinking anymore. You're standing up a little straighter. And here's the thing. You don't have to have done anything extraordinary. The act of believing your experience matters, that's what builds confidence, not the other way around. You don't need to feel confident first. You just need to start treating your story like it deserves to be told. Let's be honest about something. Most of us reach this age with a mental list of things that didn't quite work out. The career that plateaued, the relationship that struggled, the dreams we set aside. And if we're not careful, that list becomes the story we tell ourselves about who we are. There's a phrase that changes everything, though. It's simple. I am still growing. Not I grew, not I used to be someone. Present tense, still. When life hasn't unfolded exactly as you hoped, and whose life has, this mindset prevents something dangerous. It prevents you from spending your remaining years dwelling on what you lack. Because the truth is, you're not a finished product. You never were. None of us are. Even now, you're learning things about yourself, about what matters, about how to handle disappointment or loss or unexpected joy. That's not consolation. That's not settling. That's actual growth happening in real time. The people who age well, and I mean really well, not just physically but in their spirits, they're the ones who stay curious about their own development. They don't see their past as a closed book. They see it as context for what they're still becoming. You know what we do to ourselves? We look at things we never accomplished and we say, I can't do that. Full stop. Final answer. But there's a word that changes the entire meaning of that sentence. Yet. I can't do that yet. You might be thinking, come on, I'm 75 years old. It's a little late for yet. But is it? Think about challenges you've already overcome in your life. Things you once thought were impossible. Maybe you learned to drive later than most people. Maybe you figured out computers when you swore you never would. Maybe you survived something, grief, illness, loss, that you didn't think you could survive. You've already proven you can learn. You've already proven you can adapt. The growth mindset isn't about becoming someone new. It's about recognizing that the person you are has never stopped being capable of learning. Yes, some things are harder now. Yes, some doors have closed. But the door to understanding yourself better, that one never closes. When you look at an experience where you didn't succeed and you think, I haven't mastered this yet, instead of, I failed at this, something subtle but profound happens. You're giving yourself permission to still be in process. And that permission, that's what keeps people feeling alive. Here's something they don't tell you about getting older. It's not just that difficult things happen. That's always been true. It's that when difficult things happen now, we sometimes feel like we should have it all figured out by now. Like we should be wise enough, experienced enough to handle anything without it throwing us off balance. But grief still hits hard. Loss still hurts. unexpected changes still disorient us. And when we can't make immediate sense of what's happening, we panic a little. We think maybe we're losing our sharpness, our resilience. But actually, the opposite is happening. When you take time to reflect on difficult experiences, to really sit with them and understand what happened and how it unfolded, you're not dwelling, you're building psychological strength. Think of it like this. Every time you process a hard experience, you're creating a framework. You're developing the mental muscles that help you handle the next hard thing. It doesn't make the pain go away, but it gives you a structure for understanding it, for placing it somewhere in the larger story of your life. People who do this, who reflect rather than just react, they develop what researchers call cognitive resilience. They're not avoiding difficulty. They're just getting better at metabolizing it, at turning experience into wisdom, rather than letting it turn into bitterness or confusion. Your mind is still capable of this. It's actually one of the things that can improve with age, if we let it. Here's something that happens so gradually we don't even notice it. Over the years, we start understanding ourselves through other people's eyes. We become the grandmother who bakes, the grandfather who tells the same jokes, the neighbor who's always available, the parent who never complains. These might be true things about us, but somewhere along the way, they become the only things. We lose track of the person underneath the roles. When things haven't worked out as we'd hoped, and let's face it, nobody's life unfolds exactly according to plan, it's especially easy to lose ourselves in what other people need us to be, because at least then we feel useful, needed. But here's what happens when you spend time with your own story, when you journal about who you were before all these roles accumulated, when you remember what you cared about, what excited you, what made you angry or passionate or curious. You start to recognize yourself again. Not the young version of yourself. We're not trying to go backwards, but the essential self, the person who's been there all along underneath the expectations and responsibilities and decades of adapting to what life required. This isn't selfish. It's actually the opposite. Because when you know who you are, really know, not just the roles you play, you can be more authentically present with the people in your life. You're not performing anymore. You're just being. And that self-awareness, it helps you make better choices about how you want to spend whatever time you have left. Not based on what you think you should do, based on what actually matters to you. So here we are. These aren't abstract ideas. This is what happens when you take your own story seriously, when you give it the attention it deserves, not to live in the past, but to understand how the past has shaped who you are now. Because here's the truth, your story is still being written, right now, today. The chapters you've already lived contain lessons you're still learning, and in giving them attention, whether that's through writing or talking or just quiet reflection, you're not being nostalgic. You're building the psychological strength and self-understanding that will carry you forward. What story have you been carrying that deserves your attention? Thank you for listening. Have a good night.